The first night we set up our bed in the empty room of our condo above the Tennessee River, they'd heard we were coming. Those who continued to keep the land despite the imposition of newcomers and the forced exile of our relatives.
That was Joy Harjo reading her poem Exile of Memory, which is the lead poem in her Poet Laureate project. After reading this poem multiple times myself, I started thinking about how much loss and grief the Native American people have faced ever since Europeans began colonizing the Americas hundreds of years ago. This led me to hypothesize that there would be instances of presence of absence in the larger work of Living Nations, Living Words, which displays grief still carried by Native Americans today. For this project, I chose to randomly sample poems from the larger project. There's roughly 50 poems in Living Nations, Living Words, and so I used a number wheel and spun 4 times with the addition of Joy Harjo's Exile of Memory to put together 5 poems for my data set. This roughly accounts for 10% of the entire data set. I also chose to emergently code my data set. This meant after I had my full list of poems, I read through all of them without thinking about my hypothesis or making notes of any kind. I read through them again, this time writing down things I thought were interesting, and then a third time trying to connect all of them and find patterns between all of the poems. This yielded around 7 codes, 5 of which became instrumental in the research of this project. The 5 major reproducible codes used in the project are schools, loss of language, mementos, communication with the dead, and the earth personified. Various types of schooling is mentioned throughout the data set. All schooling is outside native reservations or tribes. Schooling can be classes at church or all the way up to a collegiate level. One example of this code is lines 23 through 25 of O'Janen's poem. Lines 23 through 25 are one of the many instances throughout the specific poem where the narrator struggles to speak in their native tongue due to schooling. The loss of native languages is prominent in the dataset. This code was captured based on talking about foreign languages and the struggle to remember/teach them. An example of this is in Harjo's Exile of Memory, line 48, when Harjo talks about children just being stolen from their homes and says, "and now clean, given prayers in a foreign language to recite." This shows how Native Americans' languages have been taken and replaced with a foreign one. Mementos were prominent throughout the entire data set. A memento is a souvenir to remind someone of a person, place, or event. Every mention of a memento of native culture is recorded here. In North Sun's poem, lines 25 through 26 say, "and my rearview mirror has an eagle feather tied to it." These lines come right after a section of the poem where she's talking about how she hasn't felt connected to her nativeness in a long time. Communication with the dead. The dead are shown to have a level of interaction with the world of the living. Any instance of communication between the dead and the living found was recorded. This could include talking or responses to actions. An example of this is in Edric's poem, which reads from lines 29 through 30, "In the refrigerator, accept new forms of life, and talk to the dead, who drift in through the screened windows, who collect." The next code is Earth personified. Throughout the dataset, the Earth is personified in various ways. Whether it be family or protector, the Earth is treated as an active force that is doing something or is named accordingly. The presence of absence in Living Nations, Living Words is supported by 3 authors, Thomas Fuchs, Avril Madrell, and Emily Robinson. There is no academic research on Living Nations, Living Words as a whole, but certain aspects I'm talking about are covered in different academic settings. Thomas Fuchs is a leading researcher in psychiatry. He's affiliated with 404 different publications, and his works have been cited over 12,000 times. He describes the presence of absence as seeking and expecting the return or feeling as if the dead are still with them. This can be through loss of shared world and shared habits, internal bodily disruption, past and present getting distorted, or feeling the presence of the deceased still with them. This is the standard I held my research up to when seeing if presence of absence was featured throughout the larger project. Leading cultural geographer Avril Madrell, in her article Living with the Deceased, Absence, Presence, and Absence Presence, talks about how places and memorial objects can help continue bonds no matter religious or secular. Madrell found that no matter religious or secular, memorial objects tend to be part of the ongoing day-to-day life of all of the living. In Emily Robinson's Objects, Documentation, and Identification, Materiality and Memory of American Indian Boarding Schools at the Heard Museum, she analyzes the Heard Museum's exhibition Remembering Our Indian School Days, the Boarding School Experience. She focuses on objects such as student uniforms, photographs, and personal belongings. She says these are tools that document and communicate experiences of Indigenous students, and these artifacts do more than represent historical fact. They construct memory of these events and affect the identity of Native Americans today. Fuchs, Madrell, and Robinson are in three drastically different academic fields. They all three touch on something of presence of absence, the works of Living Nations, Living Words. The Case of Boarding Schools in the United States of America by Lajamodiere and Carmen emphasizes the trauma inflicted by Native American boarding schools. The trauma lasted way longer than classes were in session. The result of these schools was the loss of language, cultural practices, and familial bonds. This, in turn, has led to elevated rates of mental health disorders, substance abuse, incarceration, poverty, and suicide within Native communities. The two authors had worked together before this piece when they gave an address to the United Nations Summit in 1995. The two are experienced Native writers who have been heard on a global scale. Characteristics of recurrent visions of the non-physical world among cognitively unimpaired elders of the Ojibwe tribal nation by William G. Manth and Adam D. Block as the primary authors record characteristics of tribal spiritual experiences, which includes people who claim to talk to the dead. This source, along with Darren McDougall's The Role of Nature in Iroquois Spirituality, gives insight to Native beliefs about nature and speaking to the dead. The names behind these sources aren't huge, however, they have both been heavily peer-reviewed, meaning these works are in accordance with a number of other scholars. Though these studies are not from people at the top of their field, nor Native researchers like the other articles, they still contain verifiable facts that help supplement the points about spirituality that emerged from the data set. Adding together the two codes, mementos and loss of language, give us presence of absence. The two codes emphasize a loss of shared worlds and shared habits. Memorial objects can bring remembrance and continue bonds long after someone is lost. The loss of language creates a search to fill in what was culturally lost, which makes mementos more meaningful and a physical reminder of the absence. School plus loss of language plus mementos gives us cultural alienation. The force of boarding schools for Native Americans ripped away parts of their culture from them. There was an emphasis throughout of being fed with foreign words or ideas, as illustrated by portions of Harjo's poem Exile of Memory. Mementos hold weight as physical attachments to one's heritage, even if they cannot still speak their ancestors' language. Communication with the dead and earth personified give us insight into Native American spirituality. Many Native tribes believe that nature is not just background to our lives, but rather an integral part, just like a family member. This reveals beliefs in communication with the dead, that their dead are still with them. These codes together also reveal beliefs that man is intertwined with nature. Both are referred to like they're watching and share a familial connection, even though people have passed. In conclusion, presence of absence is featured throughout the project. Cultural alienation and spirituality are also focuses that emerge from the data. The two contribute to understanding the grief Native people deal with still today. More research focusing on Native spirituality specifically could provide new insight on how Native people deal with and express their grief.